And then going to the next question, was there a difference you think or a shift at the time that Good Religion came out? Because I don't know, like I remember when I first saw the album, I guess I was back when I was kind of like I was kind of like those Christian listeners that were kind of like very judgmental in terms of like what Christian artists were putting out there. And I remember like seeing your album cover, I was kind of like, is this like worldly? Is this like Christian? And then over time it grew on me. I remember like first listening to it, I could tell it wasn't like cut in the same cloth as like what most other Christian artists were doing at the time. And so listening to the album, it just felt different. It felt like a little bit like outside the box. Would you say like when you guys put out that Good Religion album, there was kind of like a difference in kind of like what other Christian artists were traditionally used to putting out there, like whether CHH or just Christian?
Yeah, I mean, look, when we did that stuff, we weren't considering Christian versus non-Christian. Like, it wasn't as linear back then, because back then you didn't have like you didn't have Christians that were successful in the non-Christian industry and a blueprint for that. And the blueprint for that really is, if you want to go be successful in the general market, you shouldn't really be doing anything in the Christian market. That's what we, in hindsight, like if we look back at hindsight, right? Mm-hmm. And we look at the two guys that have kind of been the most successful that have had that model work, which is Toby Wigway and Nick D. Yeah. Two people I could think of the most, right? Both of them intentionally they definitely don't do church shows. Yeah. They don't do youth conferences, and they don't even really collaborate with Christian artists at all, right? Like me and Nick have done a bunch of records together, but none of that stuff's really came out. So it's almost like you have to draw a line in the sand and not go and get the church bag. And the church bag, when you're full time, man, that couple grand will hold you down, to go do a youth conference real quick. Mm-hmm. So we didn't know that though. Like, we didn't know that like once you step across and you start doing church stuff, now there's an expectation of you to be this like pastor rapper. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to do what Toby and Nick did now, just not really having any sort of model on how to do it, not really having the wisdom on how to like have the restraint to say no to the church shows, so that it wasn't confusing, to not put our stuff on Rapzilla, mm-hmm. so that it wasn't confusing, to do Facebook ads, but in a totally different way. Yeah. Right? We didn't really understand that back then. And I think now it's actually, in my opinion, I think now it's way easier because you can just go direct to consumer, right? Mm-hmm. Back then it was a little bit more complicated. So like a good interview with Wado would help. A good article on Rapzilla would help. And we were getting a little bit of love on like Hip Hop DX and Two Dope Boys, but it wasn't really moving the needle, man. So it's like, I think it's all about like, it's gonna sound weird, but like making art from a place of desperation is not healthy. Even though it's romanticized and like being the struggling artist and all that stuff, like it's not great to like be in a place of desperation, because then you're confused and you're double-minded and you don't know what you want, right? Yeah. Whereas like in hindsight, like we should have just picked, like we should have said, all right, we're gonna be mainstream artists and we're not doing any church shows and we're just gonna lock in here, and the people who know we're Christian, they know we're Christian, or we're gonna do Christian stuff and make the music overtly Christian. But we were trying to do music from the church, not necessarily music for the church. Yeah. So if it's music from the church, it's gonna feel more vulnerable and confessional and cathartic and conversational. It's not going to be as like overtly theological. And we just kind of let the tide take us to the Christian realm, mm-hmm. even though like I don't think in our heart of hearts we wanted to be Christian rappers. Mm-hmm. And that's controversial to say, because if like you're a Christian and you rap, why would you not want to be a Christian rapper? It's like, well, because of all the other expectations you just said, mm-hmm. right? All the other expectations you just said of like, yo, this feels worldly, this feels this feels that. And people probably feel that same way about, I don't know, Toby's music or Nick D's music, where I kind of see the bigger picture of what they're attempting to do, and I'm all for it. And I know Nick pretty well personally. So I think lack of resource, lack of imagination, lack of a blueprint, and so yes, then what happens is then other people who kind of have similar views start trying to do what the Dream Junkies did in the Christian space, which I don't think it was ever supposed to work in the Christian space. Like Lecrae was intentionally trying to pull away from the Christian space. So was Andy, right? Yet we were all still going and getting a Christian bag occasionally, because we know that church shows pay more. so it just becomes convoluted and unhelpful to either audience, because if I'm a non-Christian and I like your stuff, or say I'm like culturally Christian, like like I don't really go to church, but like Jesus is cool, and then like I go watch you at some random church in the middle of nowhere and there's a weird altar call and there's like that's confusing to the audience, the mainstream audience, the non-Christian audience. So I think it was doomed to fail from the beginning, man. I think it was doomed to fail from the beginning. Again, now it's so much easier in that if you wanted to tour, you can literally just go on Peerspace, book a venue in your favorite cities, and just throw your own shows. Completely sidestep the church and completely sidestep needing a booking agency. Completely sidestep needing to do anything with CCM or anything with Rapzilla, and just go directly to your consumer. Leverage Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and go directly to your consumer. Throw your own shows, build your own infrastructure. There you go. Like that's the model now. Especially if you're just a rapper, that means you don't need a band, you don't really need a DJ. You can literally just pull up and throw your own shows using Peerspace. Find a sound system in the area. It's so much simpler now, but back then, man, it wasn't really like that. And again, we also didn't know what we know now.
No, especially because even the way you're talking, I feel like some Christians will probably think like this is blasphemous or whatever, like what we're speaking about. But the reality is, like, the biggest misconception is that like people think you can get a bag in the mainstream than in the church, and like that's like the biggest like misconception. Like you get paid more doing
total opposite. You get paid way more at church shows.
Exactly.
Total opposite. Because the mainstream is, unless you're already booming and you have a massive audience, or you're like connected to somebody that's like booming, like a major label or co-sign or whatever, you're not making big money for soft ticket sales shows like a festival.
Right.
You're not making a ton of money at a festival, right? And this is true right now in real time. Like I just talked to someone that works with Montell, and they flat out told me like Hulvey's guarantee is more than Montell's, or it was 6 months ago. You know what I mean? Montell makes less at these festivals that he was doing when he was doing the festival circuit than Hulvey does in Christian youth groups and Christian conferences Christian, right? And so that's like, but Montell's way bigger artist than Hulvey, right? But that's the part that I don't think the consumer understands. So they see somebody trying to go mainstream and they think it's like for personal gain. And yes, if Montell becomes the next Drake, absolutely he'll make more money than Andy Mineo or Lecrae. But the odds of any Christian becoming the next Drake is so small. But on a mid-tier level artist, you're cleaning up doing churches and conferences and youth groups. You're cleaning up. You're making 10 grand, 15 grand a show.
Wow.
No one's getting paid that kind of money to go open on Lollapalooza's third stage at 11 a.m. Like no one's paying you 15 grand to do that show. You know what I mean? Like, so I think the consumer is confused, and then you start reading into people's motives and appeal to motive fallacy and start thinking that people are just doing this to make more money, and it's not. Like, and I think Lecrae just put a video out on TikTok and like addressed this and said like, I don't make more money in the churches. Like I just don't. I don't make more money in the world. I just don't. I make way more money in churches. I don't think the consumer understands this, and then it just kind of looks like people are selling out and they're trying to go mainstream and whatever. Versus saying, hey man, like he genuinely wants to reach more people in the mainstream because that's what he feels like his burden is for this season. You know?
Yeah, no, just because if you're really gonna go out in the mainstream, you have to be you really have to be locked in, and you really have to stand on like what your purpose is. Just because I remember speaking on it a little while ago, but there's some artists that kind of like make vibey music, but don't really have a purpose, or they're not really speaking to anyone. And so whenever you make music, if you're gonna make music apart from the church, you have to know what your brand is. You have to know what your message is, and also as well, because for you guys to make music not for the church but from the church, to reach like the unfamiliar masses and everything like that, I would say you guys definitely reached that target audience for sure. And then, like how you were saying, like how the Good Religion album was a good conversational album, speaking into people's lives and everything like that. That's what I got out of it as like the album grew on me over the years. So for sure.